I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Friday, January the 13th, Friday the 13th. Brought to you in part by Noromycin by Norbrook. Noromycin 300 LA is effective and economical, and it's your go-to antibiotic for a wide range of cattle diseases and infections. For more information, go to norbrook.com. Food inflation, we got some information here late in the week on your consumer price inflation, and it's actually down just a little bit month over month. It's the first time it's been down month over month for a couple, 3 years here, and it just shows the brilliant policies of our fearless leader, President Magoo, are finally starting to take hold there. If you guys believe that, more power to you. But your consumer price inflation on goods that consumers buy was down 0.1% for the month. It was still up 6.4% for the year, but it was up as much as 8.5% compared to a year earlier, earlier in the year in 2022. But this inflation is bad. It's backed off a little bit. It's still bad, but food inflation has not backed off yet. Our food inflation, the food that we eat at home, bought at grocery stores, was up 0.2% for the month still, and up 11.8% for the year. The food that we eat away, your food service and fast food and restaurants and all that kind of thing, was up 0.4% for the month and up 8.3% for the year. So we haven't backed off much there. Your retail beef in 2022 in the month of December was up 21% compared to your retail beef in December of 2021. Your packers, your in-between guys, they made most of that money. Yeah, your cattle are some higher, but they're always going to get the full blow of any kind of money to be made. But poultry is what's really high, guys. Poultry in 2022 in December was up 28% compared to what it was in December of 2019. That is significant for fowl. And your eggs are up 60% in price a year ago compared to December of a year ago. Unbelievable how our eggs have gone up, and most of us don't even pay any attention to what eggs cost. You know, we're lucky if we open up the lid on the package and make sure that there's not any broken ones in there, let alone check the price on them. But these eggs have gotten significantly higher. There's some other information that kind of grinds on me. It has ground on me for the last few years here. But in 2022, we marked an all-time record for the highest percentage of fed cattle that graded high choice and prime in history, with an average dressed steer carcass weight of 910 pounds. And you guys, if you're a little bit naive, you might think, oh my gosh, you know, we're doing such a good job feeding these cattle. Our feed costs have been through the roof, guys. They've been backing off on the corn in these rations as much as they can. And they're not feeding them quite as long. Yeah, we're making the cattle bigger. We're doing well with that. The cattle are growing bigger. But if you think that these cattle or these finished cattle are fatter than what they were back in years ago in the old days, whenever they weighed 11 or 1,200 pounds, completely full obese fat. If you think that these cattle now are fatter and have better carcasses than what those cattle are, you're pretty naive. If you think that this has all been done through genetics, my ass. It's been done through camera grading, instrument grading. We don't have human beings standing on the line looking at that ribbed carcass anymore, grading that carcass, swinging a hammer, putting the grade on it anymore. Several years ago, probably 12, 15 years ago, we started using cameras and you had a bunch of graders get together, and they would grade a carcass, and then they would take a picture of it, and then they would dial that in and correlate it to the computer, and then they did it several times over many hundreds of carcasses, and then they got to where the group of graders couldn't keep up with the cameras anymore, because we've gotten technology to the point where the camera could look at it and do a more precise grading. Plus the camera didn't have any conscience, so it would give more yield grade 5s, more yield grade 4s, more primes, more things that were out of the ordinary or away from average. But over the years, and the cameras, the instruments belong to the packing plants. They do not belong to USDA. Now they'll have a grader sitting around an office eating donuts that might go in there and kind of look at it and make sure it's still on track once in a while, but they don't oversee the grading like they used to. And it's gotten to be a problem. It's a problem that hasn't been a big deal, because you guys that own the cattle are tickled to death because the cattle are grading better. The packers are tickled to death because the cattle are grading better, and the consumers don't know the difference. So they're the ones that are getting taken advantage of, and it's finally gotten out of hand. And USDA does plan to change the way that it goes in and checks these. Change the regularity that they go in and check these. And at some point the party's going to be over, guys. This has really gotten out of hand. I was talking to a meat grading supervisor that I used to work with many years ago, and he told me that they would go in there and recalibrate those cameras, get them dialed back in, and then in just no time, funny, they'd get back out of whack again. Wonder how that happens. You know, back in the old days, it was just they would have what they called taggers that was standing on the line with the USDA meat graders that worked for the plant, and they would scream and holler and fight and argue, trying to get the line moved, the choice select line moved, if they could get a few more carcasses called choice or even prime. Prime used to be a fluke of nature. When I became a USDA cattle grader, prime was a fluke of nature. It was maybe 3%, not even 3% of USA's American fed cattle would reach the prime grade. And now it's 10%. That's unbelievable. And back in the old days when we were reaching the 3%, most of those were fat jerseys because they were so light muscled. And now just all of a sudden this genetics and everything has gotten so much better, as high as feed is. I think when the cattle quit growing and petered out at 11 or 1200 pounds and corn was basically free, I think that the carcasses were better back then, and I'm sure the steaks were better. But like I said, nobody's there to blow the whistle, because the only one that's getting screwed is the consumer, and they don't know the difference. But I see that changing here probably this year, and we're going to find out more and more about that. Let's talk about your board on Thursday. February live cattle futures down 20 cents at 157.55. April down 40 cents at 160.92. Back months on live cattle down 45 cents to up just 7 cents. January feeder cattle down $1 at 182.12. March down 127 at 184.27, and you think, well, grains must have been up. Yes, grains were up big from a grain market friendly WASDE report and your supply and demand and all kinds of grain reports that came out on Thursday morning before the board closed. Your grain reports come out before the board closes, and then we get to see the reaction. Your cattle reports for the most part come out after the board closes. But your back months on feeder cattle were down $1.17, and that was on your nearbys, and they were down up through August. But then after August, when we start getting closer and worried more about next year's crop, then they were up 15 to up 20 cents on your feeder cattle. March corn, like I said, it was up big because of friendly crop report and supply and demand report, up 15 cents at 6.71. January beans up 14.5 cents a bushel at 15.29.5. Fat cattle trade starting to develop in the north, but we have still not sold anything in the south. Guys have hooked in the south, and they're wanting to eliminate that premium that the north has been getting actually for the last couple 3 years. They think their cattle are just as good in the south, and in fact Kansas has got more of the better grading cattle than Nebraska has of late. Colorado's confidential. They don't get enough trade over in Colorado from enough packers to let us see that information. But your show lists were reportedly sharply lower this week. However much stock you take in the reporting of the show list, why any feedlot would tell somebody what their show list is, I would never know, and they never seem to ring true. But show lists were supposedly the cattle that were ready to sell, the cattle that they were going to show to the packers and offer for sale. They were supposed to be much lighter than the previous week, but I don't know if that makes any difference or if it's ever true at all. Iowa sold 4,400 head on Thursday. They've only sold 9,500 head, which is a little less than half what they typically sell for the week. Live sales 158 to 159, which is extreme top of last week's range, and dress sales at 252, which is fully steady. Nebraska only 4,100 head sold, 5,900 head for the week, which is nothing. There's still a lot of business to do here on Friday, but live sales were off the market in Nebraska, and live sales were light in volume from 156 to 157. Why people would take that, I have no idea. And dress sales were steady from 250 to 252. Like I said, Kansas and Texas have not sold anything except for Texas selling a little wad of cattle off the market, 400 head at 156, which would be $1 lower. But like it's been going here all throughout this rally, the guys that wait till the very last minute are going to get the highest market. It's going to be fully steady to a buck higher here on Friday. Whenever they finally trade, we're going to see more trade at 160. I believe, I can't guarantee that, but I believe 160 will be more prominent on the sales that we see on Friday for the guys that hung in the longest and waited them out. These packers are short bought. They're trying to get back going again. They've got a lot of contracts to fill, a lot of orders to satisfy, getting back going after the holidays. And they don't have a lot of cattle bought, open market cattle bought for short-term delivery. So yeah, they got their 80% or more Formula Sweetheart deal cattle coming in, but they still have to fill that 20% gap in their supply needs. Choice box beef down hard again. Now I understand your box beef cutout values are lower on what little dab of current market, spot market that we get to see, which is even thinner than the fat cattle market that we get to see. But that's not the cattle people's problem. That's the packers' problem, not the cattle people's problem. Tight supplies and good demand are in our favor as the cattle people, and we need to stick to our guns. Just because choice boxes are cheaper and packers are wanting to keep cattle steady or lower does not mean that has to happen, guys. You have the hammer. Use it. Choice boxes down $3.24. They've been down $9 since Tuesday. Choice boxes on Thursday afternoon at $277.49. Select's down $1.09 at $257.01. Slaughter has been aggressive, 505,000 through the first 4 days of this week. Can't compare it to the holiday week, but it's 48,000 more than the same week a year ago. Actual information come in with your average dressed steer carcass weights 5 pounds lighter than the previous report. They've been down 12 pounds in the last 2 weeks. Of course, that information's 2 weeks old, so that's after the big cold spurt there, but they are backing off big time. And average dressed steer carcass weight's down 13 pounds from the same report a year ago. That is very, very bullish also. Let's talk about your feeder cattle markets. Your real-time index on DV auction late in the day on Thursday sitting at 179.94, down 43 cents. The pressure the number of cattle that's moved this week, now that we're later in the week, the cold, the slop, the snow that's stacked up in the northern plains is hurting the market up there. But a ton of cattle here have moved in the last week or so. We've got nearly 60,000 head in your RTI pool, which is a 7-day moving average of just 7 to 899 pound steers through your middle 12 states in the auctions that we cover with Cattle Market Central. That's more than what you get with your CME cash feeder cattle index that the federal state market reporters get. Talk about your big sales on Thursday. Farmers and Ranchers Livestock in Salina, Kansas had 4,500 head. Market was a little bit uneven, and like I said, the pressure from all the cattle that's moved, and those cattle are getting delivered, and there's just not as much demand late in the week after we've sold as many cattle as we have this week. But feeder steers $1 to $3 higher, feeder heifers $1 to $3 lower, steer calves $2 to $5 lower, and heifer calves $1 to $3 lower. Kind of surprises me that the calves were that much lower, but take that trend with a grain of salt because it's given to you by Kansas federal state market reporters, which are pretty much incompetent. Talk about your stick out sale in Salina was 60 head of steers weighed 812 pounds at $189.75. As far as the markets went this week, Salina, Kansas is just too far north to get those big prices. You get down into southern Kansas, into Oklahoma, and they can sell the highest cattle weighing in the low 8s into the 190s. We did not see that in Nebraska, South Dakota, northern Missouri, or Iowa. It's just your cattle have been selling at a premium. Feeder cattle and calves have been selling at a premium in the southern plains. You can, and I've talked to guys that are doing it, some guys that have some wheat in some spots in the southern plains are buying fancy steer calves in the Midwest and up into the northern plains, putting the freight on them and still getting them delivered a lot better quality, a lot better condition, and a lot better health than they can buy calves closer to home. Now you tell me how that works. I don't know. I just believe it's because the guys in Texas, the guys in Oklahoma, the guys in southern Kansas, they realize more so how tight the numbers are going to be because they've seen the cows that have sold. Yes, they've sold cows in the northern plains and in the Midwest, but they've been doing that for the last 3 years and they just don't believe it. But the guys that saw the mile-long lines at the little mom and pop sale barns in the southern plains, and they saw all those cows sell, and they know that they were not restocked and they were never replaced, realize how tight our numbers are going to be. Winter livestock in Pratt, Kansas, 4,400 head, good sale for them. Feeder cattle, steers and heifers unevenly steady in Pratt, and calves $5 to $7 higher. Now that sounds more realistic to me, and even more whenever I see the stick out sale in Pratt, which was 126 head of 494 pound steer calves, same as 500 pounds, bring $2.56 a pound. Wow. Your Zoeta stick out sale of the day was Mitchell Livestock Marketing out of Mitchell, South Dakota. 8,400 head of feeder cattle sold in Mitchell on Thursday. Pulled this automated market report a little early here from Cattle Market Central. Federal state market reporters up there are much better than they are in Kansas. They called the steers mostly steady to $3 lower, heifers mostly $1 to $4 lower, and that's compared to a much lighter supply a week ago. Just when you get over 8,000 head of cattle there, that hurts the market. It's just a big supply. But look at this automated market report. And you see your best tested weights. How about 691 head of 6-weight steers in Mitchell, South Dakota? The average 663 pounds with the weighted average price of $194.74. 847 head of 7-weight steers, average $758. Weighted average price $179.93. 731 head of 8-weight steers, Mitchell, South Dakota, averaged $837. Weighted average price $175.14. Heifers, 661 head of 6-weight heifer calves, average 649. The weighted average price of 170,266. 1,076. We haven't seen a big glut of heifers like that in a sale for quite a while. But 1,076 head of 7-weight feeder heifers in Mitchell, South Dakota, average 736 pounds with a weighted average price of 169.70. A lot of those probably should have been kept. 749 head of 8-weight heifers, averaged 852. Haven't seen that many 8-weight heifers in a long time, at 165.44. Going to give you some individual quotes from all around the circuit. Wilcox Livestock Auction in Wilcox, Arizona. That is southeastern Arizona, not far from the New Mexico line down there. It's a DV auction sale. You can view and bid that sale every week there, and they've got good cattle, desert cattle, some of them elevation desert cattle, which are the best you can find, hard as rocks. They sold 50 head, 428-pound steers at $223. Somebody should have been bidding on those to get them up there a little high. I'm not saying that's below the market. I'm just saying there's an opportunity there. You guys should be checking out Wilcox Livestock Auction, Wilcox, Arizona. How about Broken Bow Livestock Market, Broken Bow, Nebraska? They sell 55 steer calves, weigh 602 at $219. That's pretty impressive. Burlington Livestock Exchange in Burlington, Colorado. They sell 107 steers, weigh 7 1/4 at $192. But the most impressive quote that I saw late last week or anywhere, anytime recently on calves, and your Macrocin No BS top quote for the day, come out of Orland Livestock Commission Yard. That's another DV auction barn. You can view and bid that every week. That's Central California, north of Sacramento. We've been talking about how much moisture they've gotten out in that country. Here's the result. 53 steer calves weigh 467 at $2.81 a pound. And that's your feeder flash for Friday.